Delighted to welcome you to mark and celebrate the availability of digitised church records on site in PRONI. There's no doubt, and I'm sure you will agree, that church records are of tremendous social and historical value. Evidence that we have suggests that a large number of those who come to PRONI do so to undertake family history research. PRONI has a significant holding of church records, which includes original records, microfilm copies, and now digitised copies. These records are invaluable sources for family history research. Many researchers, when they come here, the first port of call is into the PRONI search room, where they can use a guide to church records, which is compiled by a former PRONI colleague, Valerie Adams, who I'm obviously going to embarrass completely by saying Valerie is present with us today, and thank you very much for your work on that, Valerie. Church records are also a key source for historians, particularly local and social historians. Many of you will know that churches played and continue to play an important role in the life of the community, particularly in relation to education and welfare, much of which is documented in the church minute books. I want to say a little bit about our approach to digitisation. PRONI no longer uses microfilm as a means of copying records deposited with us on a temporary basis. In line with other United Kingdom and Irish archival institutions, we are now digitising such records. For the past 4 years, PRONI has embarked on a programme to digitise church records. Digitised records related to 10 Church of Ireland churches and 5 Methodist churches form the first phase of our digitisation programme. This programme has only been possible because of partnership and cooperation with churches. Churches have agreed to deposit their records with us on a temporary basis and agreed to make the digitised copies publicly available in a controlled manner. I'd like to thank all of the churches who have worked with PRONI to bring us to where we are today. We hope to build on this excellent foundation through future collaboration and partnership, working with churches from across the Christian traditions and other faith groups. I'd like to say a few words about the actual process of digitisation. Here in PRONI, we are justifiably proud of the fact that the digitisation is undertaken in-house by our experienced reprographics technicians. As you might imagine, the digitisation process is extremely labour intensive. Each individual volume takes several weeks to digitise, and where necessary, volumes are paginated, each page then shot with an overhead mounted camera. The resulting image can be enhanced if it's required, and the metadata is created. Obviously a very painstaking process. David said a few thank yous, and I want to sort of crave your indulgence to add to that, though I don't apologise for that, because I think it's important that we do recognise the work that colleagues and others have put in to bring us to where we are today. Firstly, the quality of the images that have been produced is a testament, as I've said, to the dedicated work of our reprographics team. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to say well done to Joy, Gareth and Sam, who I think are here somewhere hiding maybe, but well done to that team. I'd also like to thank PRONI's dedicated team of preservation assistants, whose help is also invaluable in this programme. I'd also like to thank our ICT team in PRONI, who made a valuable contribution to the technical solution, and if you have any questions about that, please don't ask me. But a lot of work went on to allow us to reach a good technical solution. And as David has mentioned, I'd also like to thank other colleagues in David's section and Stephen Scarf's public services section, who made a very valuable contribution. It was very much a team effort across PRONI, and I'm really pleased and happy with the efforts that we put in. No doubt I will have forgotten somebody, and if I have, I'm sorry. You can remind me about it afterwards. Today's digital launch is the culmination of a long and thorough behind the scenes journey. The availability of the digitised church records from 15 churches in our search room represents a milestone development for us, particularly in terms of how these records are made available to both the researcher and the public alike. PRONI is now equipped to digitally process and store digital records. Importantly, we can now preserve digital records in our digital repository, allowing them to be made available on site to the public through our catalogue. This is a very important and significant achievement. I know that there are a number of potential depositors present today. Hope that you can stay for tea or coffee after the formal presentations. This will give you the opportunity to chat with members of PRONI's private records team and other colleagues who are here. They'll be able to answer any questions or queries you might have. This hopefully will allay any concerns you might have about depositing with us. Also, briefly like to comment on PRONI's role as an archive. As I mentioned before, the archives and records that PRONI holds have tremendous social, cultural and historical value. I think it's true to say, and I'm sure that you will agree, that promoting and widening access to our archives and records helps us to better understand our modern society by linking the past to the present. When I was writing that, I wasn't sure whether it was the present to the past or the past to the present, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. A key objective for us here in PRONI is to identify, preserve and make available records and archives that reflect our unique local history, heritage and community memory. Making available these digitised church records is an excellent example of PRONI achieving this objective through partnership working with churches. We're only able to deliver against this important objective because private depositors, such as many of you present here today, have trusted us with your records and allowed us to make them publicly available. We here in PRONI take our responsibility of safeguarding all the records and archives that we hold very seriously. Our private records team have worked in partnership with churches to agree terms of access and copying so that we're not doing anything that you don't think we should do or don't want us to do. This is something that Lorraine from the private records team will mention in more detail later on. I want to thank again those churches that have made their records available for our digitization programme. And as I mentioned earlier, I would also encourage others to talk to us about doing the same thing. Mentioned partnership and collaboration several times. Partnership and collaboration are very important. It's vital that PRONI remains relevant to our existing users and reaches out to new audiences. Partnership and collaboration are key to achieving this. For me and for my colleagues, it's important that we continue to engage and collaborate with partners such as the representative church body and the Methodist Historical Society of Ireland, and also to make links with new partners, hopefully many of whom are present here today. The benefits of such partnership and collaboration are that it helps ensure that we maximise knowledge and awareness of the ongoing relevance of church records and the important role that PRONI plays, particularly in terms of making the records publicly available. Partnership working allows us to promote and increase awareness of the ongoing value and social impact that archives have for modern society. This is a point that I feel very strongly about because some people, I think, have an ill-informed view about the importance of archives, and I know I'm preaching to the converted perhaps here, but one of the challenges for me and for other senior colleagues and all colleagues here is to get that message out that archives are important and that we have a role to play in modern society.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us here this afternoon, especially given that it's a very wet Friday, so thank you very much. It has indeed been a long journey with more than a couple of hurdles along the way to get to the stage where we're now able to provide access to digitised church records on site here in PRONI. This project has followed on from the groundwork of other colleagues, and Michael has rightly acknowledged the immense contribution of Valerie Adams, who's with us today, which Valerie and others have laid the groundwork really for this new milestone, as Michael said. It is also built on the relationships that we in PRONI have established over the years with a range of churches, church authorities, societies, individuals and friends. As a project, it has involved the cooperation and support of all sections in PRONI. So on behalf of my colleagues past and present, I'm delighted to be here today to demonstrate how to search the PRONI catalogue for digitised church records. I had to smile wryly to myself when Michael said so confidently, and yes, I'm sure Lorraine will be able to do that, and hopefully technology won't let us down. Myself and Reverend Rob and Roddie, who will be speaking later on today, have had ongoing technological issues today, but whether or not, we'll continue on. So I will just do this up. So I'm aware that many people here today are already registered as PRONI readers, but for those of you who are not, the first step in accessing digitised church records or any records at PRONI is to register as a PRONI reader. So as Michael has said, that's a very simple process. There's no fee involved. You only need photographic ID and just fill in a short form, and then you're allocated your own PRONI reader's card with your own unique reader number on the back. So when you go upstairs to the first floor to the search room, which is there's always at least 2 members of staff from our public services section there to help. When you go up, you'll be able to access the PRONI catalogue through one of a number of PC terminals there. So you just put in search the catalogue, enter your own, and I apologise again if I'm preaching to the converted, but just put in your own reader number and it'll bring you access up to the entire workings of the PRONI catalogue. You can search using text, so for example if you were wanting to search for St. Anne's or St. Colum's Cathedral, you could put in the text there and it would bring back those church records we have and probably a multitude of other records. If you know the specific reference number, and on your seat, there's an embarrassment of riches on your seats today, as well as feedback forms and itineraries. There's also a list of those records from the 15 churches that have been digitised. So there's a list with the covering dates there, and I suppose most importantly for using the catalogue, the PRONI reference number. So if you have the exact PRONI reference number, you can just pop it in there. For those of you, I suppose, that are not familiar with our PRONI catalogue, our collections are arranged in a number of different categories, so to speak. Each of them with a prefix. So original, and I suppose now from this point onwards, digital church records are classified under the CR reference. Many of you here will be used to using the microfilm copies of those records upstairs. They're classified under MIC or MIC. And there are also some copy or transcript copies of church records which are catalogued under T. But for the purposes of the digitised church records, you'll be using the CR references which are on your handout. So let's see how we go. So as Michael has mentioned, in this first phase of release of digitised church records, we're looking at records from 10 Church of Ireland churches and 5 Methodist churches. So if we look, first of all, if we look at CR 622. So if we look at the records, first of all, for Salem Methodist New Connection Church, which is which merged with that of Frederick Street and then became the headquarters of the North Belfast Mission. You see at the upper level there, so we have the archive level letting us know what church we're dealing with. Underneath them, the archive is broken up into different levels. You can see for this church, all we have are baptism and marriage registers. And within that section, within that archive level, there is one baptism register dating from 1829 to 1904. So simply click here, view item. and that has actually gone straight through and opened up the digital church record. So that didn't take long at all. That was good. that was good. So you see the cover sheet here that the reprographics team will have added to the volume, which just gives the PRONI reference number again, an overview of the date, and then obviously the team digitized the cover of the volume as well. I should explain the reprographics team digitized the volume as it was, with all its imperfections, maybe faded text, and a copy of that is retained as a preservation copy in our digital repository. It's a complete image of the register as it is. They also created an access copy of that register. So unlike the microfilms, in places then they were able to bring up the font where it had faded away, get rid of maybe surface imperfections and blotches, and just make it a lot more readable. So moving on here, we can see the earliest document in the volume is a certificate recording that John Cotter at Taylor and Jane Henderson were united in the bonds of matrimony on the 3rd of July 1836. Now, a great function with the digitized church registers as opposed to the microfilms is that you can zoom in. So you can zoom in using these little buttons here, the plus or minus, or just because I'm on the big screen, I'm just going to use my mouse here. So you see you can zoom in and out, which is really useful. Okay, you can also jump forward pages. I should say that I suppose this is the first time that we've made something of a digital nature of this size available through our catalogue, and yes, it did cause lots of technical issues for us. So Joy and her team in reprographics had digitized the church volumes. Obviously they were creating huge digital files then. We had never put anything that size through our catalogue, and it started to crumble under the pressure. So the IT team had to reduce those files quite a lot, but I think you'll still agree, the quality, while it mightn't be exactly as it was when it left reprographics, it's still very acceptable. Joy and her team had also put in a number of bookmarks with each volume, so that you could maybe jump, depending on the size of the volume, by year or by decade, or if it was a combined volume, you could jump from baptisms, marriages to burials. Unfortunately, when we reduced the size of the files, we lost that functionality, but that is something that we can put back in. So what you're seeing will only get better, which is a good thing. So let me see now. So you can also jump forward pages yourself. So here we see the register proper beginning, all the details you'd expect. And the lovely addition here, isn't it? Number of children, first son, second son, which continues on throughout the register. So, and again, yes indeed, you can zoom in and out at will. Okay, so we will just look at another few records here. So let you search. Okay, so if we look at another example from the Methodist Church, let me see now, what other one do we have here on my list? Yes, so we go CR6, so Church of Ireland is CR1, Methodist Church CR6, CR6R18, so show overview, you just tab on to show. I always find it puts individual records in context when you do your show overview, which I find easier to deal with. Okay, so this is interesting in that show record. Let's see, yes, show tree, show overview. Sorry, yes, we go back to our overview and we'll hide the tree. It's a bit difficult when you're doing it on a big screen. I'm sorry about that now. This is an interesting church in that it has a mixture of hard copy material that transferred to us at an earlier date and one digital object. So within it, there is, if we just look quickly here, there is an index to baptisms. Overview. There is also a copy of printed history of Newtonards. We can go into this, show overview again, and then as you can see here, and you already see it there, but if you didn't notice it, so show record, and you notice it's different, isn't it, from the other one in that you have this additional box here, multimedia. So to view that item, you can either hit view item, or you can just click directly on it like that. Wait a few seconds and up it pops, which is great. So, so as I say, this is a Stewart's book. We will just, and the cover, of course, and we'll just jump forward a couple of pages just to get a bit of a sense of the contents. As we can see here, a list of names of those within the Ballymacarrett circuit, a list of those from whom money was collected. And if we just go forward a few more pages again, we can see more detailed year-end accounts. And again, using those in and out buttons, or control and the wheel on the mouse, if you have a mouse, you can just zoom in and out, and we see there repairs to church and schoolhouse, and various other things. There we go. The sexton's salary, and there we go. So it's as simple as that, and you can scroll through page by page. You know, you can go up and down, you can go backwards, you can zoom in and out. And as I say, you know, in the coming weeks and months, we will be able to add back in those bookmarks that we had to remove temporarily, and that will make it even easier to navigate through. So if we come out of that there now, and we just do a new search again, and let's look at some of the records from the Church of Ireland, and let's start with St. Colum's. As you can see, and you can see from your handout, a large collection of registers and other volumes, other important church volumes from St. Colum's. Let's go into the earliest one. Here, view item. Now, Stephen Lockhart in our IT section said to me, they operate on an 8-second rule. If anything is taking longer than 8 seconds to open, they know that people lose concentration and start clicking. So this is probably one of the biggest volumes that was digitized, and one of the biggest file sizes that had to be compressed and that the catalogue had to deal with. But as you can see there, that didn't take long. Sure, it didn't. Now I should say, for the purposes of those of you using the search room, these records are available on all the computers in the search room. You can access them through any of the computers in the search room that provides access to the catalogue. Because some of the bigger records were taking some time to open, you know, because some of them were going over that 8 seconds, it was getting frustrating for people. So there are 2 dedicated PC terminals in the search room pretty much opposite the information desk in the search room, and opposite, for those of you that know the search room, opposite the PRONI machines that have just the digitized church records on them, and they move a lot quicker. But you know, it's up to yourselves. You certainly can access them all on all the computers that have the access to the catalogue, but some of them you might find a wee bit slow to open. But that, thankfully, touch wood, opened quite quickly for us today. Now, I was talking to Joy earlier on this morning, just ahead of today's event, and we were remembering, are we right, Gareth, that this was the first volume that was digitized, this very large combined register from St. Column. So not only is it the oldest one among those digitized records that we're talking about today, it was the first one that was digitized, and it posed lots of problems. It was an immense volume. So from what Gareth learned from that, I suppose he was able to apply on as the digitization program rolled on. But there was all sorts of technical things to take into account, like how to prop it, before he photographed it? Was he getting all the details because it was bound quite tightly? So it was quite a challenging one. And you can see here the reprographics team have left a note. The original manuscript is difficult to read due to faded inks. This digital copy has been enhanced for readability. But again, as I said, there's a direct image copy of the volume as it was that's preserved in our digital repository. So just moving on then. And of course, as you've noticed, for all of the volumes, the reprographics team digitized the cover as well. And it's something like that. It's a thing of beauty as well, isn't it? So going back then from 1642, look at that now. So I should say, we have the records from St. Colum's on microfilm already. Over the years, due to usage, the quality was starting to deteriorate. So if there's anyone present here who's accessed the microfilm copies for St. Colum's, and then looking at this digitized version now, admittedly a compressed one, you can see it's quite impressive. We'll just go on to another page. So here, for example, baptisms for the month of March 1880 for John, son of George McConnell, and Catherine, his wife. No marriages or burials for that month, but things getting busier in April. So, and again, as I say, you can zoom in and out. You can go forward pages, back pages. So very, very easy to use. Okay, and the quality of the text, very, very readable. Okay, let me see now. We'll search for another one now, and I'm going to throw caution to the wind and try and search for the biggest one and see if it doesn't crash things. So we'll go into St. Anne's Cathedral. Again, you'll see from your handout, we've copied an extensive range of baptism, marriage and burial registers for St. Anne's. We just go in, again, let's go into the oldest one there, the oldest combined register. Again, there we go, that didn't take too long, we were under the 8 seconds. And if we go to page, let's just go and let it get started. So you can see the early pages, quite fragmentary, and again, look at that ability to zoom in and out there, so we can see Dennis O'Hamel, son of Brian O'Hamel and Anne O'Hamel, and Anne's maiden name given there, and we can see that so clearly. Okay, and let's just go to an example where we see the baptism, marriages and burials all in one page. And you see the example there. This was a very tightly bound one, and it was very hard to get the information right at the guttering there, which you see, but which the reprographics team have managed to do very well. And there's poor Silas Bleakley, son of Silas, just mentioned there. Okay. As Michael said, I would just say a few words about access to the records, and I just want to mention briefly, and you've already seen it probably on your handout, that not all of the church records that we digitized are open to the public, and we ourselves in PRONI have imposed the following access restrictions on the digitized church registers, in that baptism registers are closed for 100 years from the date of last entry. Marriage registers are closed for 84 years from the date of last entry. The burial registers themselves are open. Terms of access to other categories of church records are made in accordance with the wishes of our partner churches. For example, the normal access closure applied by the representative church body to vestry minutes would be 40 years from the date of last entry. We don't have any as recent as that in this current release. And you'll probably notice from yourself as you're looking at the list of those registers that we have digitized, In the early stages of our project, we digitized quite complete sets of registers from participating churches, including some very recent volumes. More recently, we've moved on from that approach, and we've focused on pre-1900 registers and other important church records, such as vestry minute books, or committee minute books. But just to show you an example which sort of underlines the point that even though we've become rightly so more focused in our approach, I think it's important not to be too prescriptive. So if we just do another new search here, and I just want to show you another Church of Ireland record, show overview. We were in contact as part of this year's church digitization programme with St Aidan's Church on Blythe Street in Belfast, and they allowed us to digitise a number of registers in their care, including 3 workhouse baptismal registers dating from 1886 from St Andrew's Church. Now, if we had been, our cut-off point was 1900, but if we had stuck rigidly to that, we would not have got those two later workhouse registers. We weren't even aware that they were in the church's holdings. So as part of the project, and as part of each phase of the project, it's important to be aware of just exactly what it is the church are holding, and to have that element of flexibility. Given the historical and cultural importance of those volumes, we weren't going to say we'll take number 1 and not 2 and 3. So looking then, let's go view item. That brings us directly into it. So let's just go down here quickly. And so this is the oldest volume of those workhouse registers, dating back from 1886, as I said. The front page explains in detail how individual entries within the volume are laid out. Okay, and so we can see here that all the children here were both born and baptized in the workhouse. If they had been just baptized in the workhouse, a place of residence would be given. Where both parents were married, the names of both mother and father are given. Otherwise, just the mother's name is given. Where the father had an occupation, the occupation, where at all possible, is given. And if we just go down, maybe another one here, is it? Yes. So here we go. And here, let me see now, where was it? It's always hard to find. Here we go. So this child, Margaret, born to her mother, also named Margaret Hamilton. Margaret was not resident in the workhouse, but her child was baptized there, and Margaret's work is given as a mill worker. So look at the range of information there, which is just phenomenal. So important. Now, if we're going into the later volume, if we click on it, this item is currently closed to the public. There's a 100-year access closure on these workhouse registers, which would be in keeping with the workhouse registers from the Board of Guardian Archive that we hold ourselves in PRONI, which is only right given the sensitive information held within those registers. But the important thing for us is that the 3 volumes are in local custody in the church. They're in safekeeping. All being well, they'll remain in safekeeping for decades and decades and decades to come. If the terrible happened and something happened to that volume, at least there is a copy of each of those registers here. For us, the most important thing is the record and the preservation of the record. And beyond that, of course, facilitating access and encouraging access and making it as easy as possible. But the important thing and the underlying principle of the digitization project is the preservation of these these irreplaceable pieces of our cultural history. So, so just then, I know I've probably been going on a long time, but I just very quickly want to say, those of you who are very used to dealing with microfilms in the search room and are used to having your copy card and putting it in and getting the print out for 30 pence, obviously that won't work in the current system, in that the PCs that you're viewing the records on are not hooked up to a printer. Public services have made up a copy order form. Individuals are allowed to get copies of individual entries within the register. And those of you who use our search room know that now when you order any item from the search room, you have to fill in a copyright declaration form, above which it states, I undertake that I will not use a copy except for the purpose of private study or non-commercial research, and I will not supply a copy to any other person except for the purpose of parliamentary or judicial proceedings. It also goes on to say, should I wish to reproduce a copy of this in any form at a later date, I will contact PRONI in writing. So you must, whoever gets the copy must sign to say that they are going to abide by the terms. And yes, they can have a copy for their own personal use, but no, they cannot reproduce it in any way without making contact with us, and if necessary, then we will make contact with the depositors. So I hope I've given you a sense of just what you can do on site using the PRONI catalogue. And if you have any questions, I'll be here.
Very much for your welcome. What we're going to show you now is a quarter-hour presentation that was designed to be presented at our annual conference, the Methodist annual conference last June, and it was an advocacy exercise trying to encourage churches from around Ireland to deposit their non-current documents with us. We also have to generate our own funds, and so this presentation was to the church at large, or its representatives, encouraging them when we send an appeal around once a year to send in contributions. So that will explain some of the cultural terminology and some of the in-house language. One word of explanation, a word that crops up in Methodist circles a great deal is the word connection. And it's a very special term for Methodists, and it's spelled C-O-N-N-E-X-I-O-N, and it dates back to John Wesley's days, and it implies a connection of all the Methodist societies in a conference, in our case in Ireland. So this is in 3 parts. I'm taking the first part. My colleague Jennifer is going to speak the second 5 minutes, and myself the last. We've called this a ministry of memory. Don't forget, we were addressing an ecclesiastical gathering, but we used this term ministry of memory because it was suggested to us by a man called Bob Williams, who headed up the archives of the United Methodist Church of the United States, and they have a budget of $1.5 million a year. Our history began, our story began really in 1916 when the Methodist Conference decided that the time was right to establish a Methodist Historical Society in Ireland. Despite that good resolution, it was another 10 years before the society formally came into being. The committee was approved and a repository was established at Wesley College, Dublin. Over the next 35 years, our society was forced to move 3 times. First from Wesley's College, Dublin, and this was where it used to be in Stephen's Green on the left-hand picture. And then in 1942, then it moved to Edgehill College in Belfast, which was then a new venue for our seminary. And then during the Second World War, Edgehill College was taken over by the War Department, and we were forced our society was forced to move its archives to Carlisle Memorial Methodist Church. And then a brave new world dawned for the society when we were given a small room in Aldersgate House on University Road, and vitally a corridor. Inside the room, I think I should pay tribute first of all, if I can get this. When Aldersgate House opened in 1961, the first archivist was the Reverend R.H. Gallagher, father of Eric Gallagher of Grosvenor Hall fame. And then from 1967, the archivist librarian was Marian Kelley. The room was provided with, I'm at the right side, yes, I beg your pardon. The room was provided with display cabinets and a magnificent collection of Wesleyana, which was the gift of David Bradshaw, bank executive and the son of a primitive Wesleyan Methodist preacher. And these artifacts formed the core of the collection, along with many rare books and pamphlets that he and others deposited. Marian Kelley served as archivist for 30 years, and her background as a librarian at Queen's University enabled her to bring a professionalism to the management of our society's holdings. In 1985, under the ACE scheme, she initiated research posts for 2 years for 2 postgraduate students to provide an index to the 90 volumes of the Irish Christian Advocate, a weekly journal of the Methodist Church. And now a rare glimpse of the corridor where many volumes of our society's library was housed. And you can see the absolute usage of every available space. To get to the books at the top shelf, you did need an extended ladder. Despite its cramped conditions, the Society's holdings were celebrated by the great Wesleyan scholar Dr. Frank Baker, who claimed our collection of 18th century editions, many printed in Dublin, of the Wesley's publications is one of the best in the world. He said the library contains more 18th century editions of the Wesley's publication than the Library of Congress, without great collections in the National Library of Ireland and Trinity College Dublin added together. The most important change in our history occurred in 2000 when we were invited by the governors of Edge Hill College, the Theological Training Centre, by them and their architect to join in planning for a new home for the Society in the new annex. And after 2 years of planning, we moved to Edge Hill in 2001. I should say that at the time that Valerie Adams was here, the British Library were doing a major survey that included PRONI, and they needed a voluntary archive as well to join, and we were invited. And so our collaboration with PRONI became quite important at that stage. And indeed, it was PRONI who moved our archives from University Road to the new annex and gave us our first acid-free boxes, and we never returned them. For those who haven't visited our rooms, this is a quick introduction. The entrance along the corridor as you approach our archives, we modelled these two-sided display windows on an example in the Linden Hall Library. If you're in the restaurant in the Linden Hall Library, you can look through to the main library, and we thought this was quite a good idea. So that was the idea behind this. And then inside, if this works, this is a typical scene during the week. I'm not sure if we can get this to, yes, right. These are mostly volunteers. There's Jennifer. I'm not quite sure what she's doing, but she's working. Yes. At any rate, This is our reading area. And then this is our storage area, and we have an environmental control unit here that keeps the rooms at a constant temperature and constant humidity. That machine at the back, which is circled in red, was the original environmental control unit, and it broke down, and we were faced with replacing it at the beginning of this year, and we had to appeal to various charities to help us raise £8,500. This is the heart of our archives, where our collection of manuscripts is kept on rolling stacks, and manuscripts and collections from around our collection are stored in acid-free boxes and folders. And after moving to our new home at Edgehill, we took steps to ensure that our archives meet the highest internationally recognized standards. I did a course of archival management at UCD. Myself and Jennifer have constantly been attending meetings to update our practice. And then for the first time in 2007, we agreed a constitution, and I beg your pardon. We approved a constitution and then developed an approved collecting, preservation and access policy.
The collecting policy is the first of the three principles under which our archives operate. Under this policy, all non-current records which reflect the life and history of the Methodist Church in Ireland are collected. And these include, for example, minutes books, marriage and baptismal registers, correspondence, circuit and society magazines, and personal papers. We're also interested in pamphlets, audio recordings, visual resources. And material is constantly coming into us from around the connection. Material is then checked for damage. All ironmongery, paper clips, pins, etc., which can over time cause significant rust damage, are removed and where necessary replaced with brass fasteners. Acquisitions are also checked for the presence of wildlife. Silverfish is a particular problem. Once the material is clean and in the best possible condition, it is placed into acid-free folders and boxes and is then ready to be catalogued. The second principle of archival management is preservation, and the main aim is to preserve items and to maintain access to them. And this is done through good conservation and cataloguing practice, and by keeping documents in an optimally controlled environment. An important aspect of conservation is recognising potential threats and preventing or minimising their impacts. As you can see from this slide, this circuit schedule book had suffered from being stored in damp conditions for a long period. Treatment using our specialist museum vac helped alleviate the worst of the accumulation of mould and spores, and this is an activity which is best carried out outdoors. Once the volume had been allowed to dry slowly, it could then be safely stored in an acid-free box. This document, it's a very valuable document, contains the records of the Strangers' Friends Society and gives a unique insight into the conditions of the poor in late 18th century Dublin, and it had been in an extremely fragile condition. The valuable information it contained could not be accessed without causing further damage, and so it was selected for repair and rebinding. Each page was individually ironed onto rice paper, and the whole volume was then rebound, and the cost of that procedure was £550. But it means that now all the information is easily and safely accessible. This slide illustrates the importance of keeping records in a secure place, preferably a fire-resistant safe. And despite the ravages of the fire which sadly destroyed the building and damaged the cover of the register, the records inside were maintained intact. There's little point in collecting material and preserving it if it cannot be made accessible. The work begun with the ACE workers, which Robin referred to, now continues week by week by our team of volunteers. Our website has been live since 2013 and allows online access to a wealth of resources held at the archives. Details of all our catalogued material is now available online through Library World, which is an integral part of our website. The catalogue now has over 6,000 items, and it can be accessed as follows. If you go to collections, then catalogues and research tools, then online catalogues, then online manuscript catalogues, and finally view catalogue. For those wishing to know what records we hold for a particular church or circuit, it is a matter of typing the name into the search box. Here we have listed items for Portadown. There are 360 items over a total of 10 pages. And there's a wide variety of items which are all in alphabetical order. And then there's an advanced search facility which narrows down the search field. Here we have searched for baptismal registers only. 16 are listed, including the particularly interesting English primitive baptisms which were recorded in the Portadown Mission Register. Back to Robin.
This is the last handover. With 250 years of records to which we hold, to try and pick out one or two things to draw lessons from was one of the challenges we faced when we were addressing our Methodist people in June. And amongst the earliest of our records are those dating back to the time of John Wesley himself. And he made 21 visits to this island, and he was a superb pastor and organizer. And over the course of those 21 visits, the equivalent of 5.5 years, he got to know the Methodist people, the growing number of Methodist members, and his team of preachers, we would now call them ministers. This is the membership book for Dublin of 1778, done in his own hand. He went through the name of every single member of the Methodist Society in Dublin, making comments and adding various notes about them. Not only did he care for his for Methodist members, but he cared for his growing team of preachers. And here was his own personal copy of his own notes on the Old Testament, which he left in Cork for the preachers in Cork. On the facing page, those at PRONI will be interested to know he'd written originally, before he gave it as a gift, he said, "This is Mr. Wesley's copy, therefore do not handle it or dirty it." This is a letter he wrote, one of many letters. Last year we got 25 autograph letters of John Wesley and Thomas Coke written to recipients in Ireland, a new accession. But here was one that we'd had earlier, and this was written to a man called Arthur Keane in Dublin, a noted Methodist supporter of the time. And here in 1784, John Wesley died in 1791, and here in 1784 he's writing to Arthur Keane, and he says, "It's strange, 2 or 3 weeks ago I was observing I have exactly the same strength and more health at 81 than I had at 21. This hath God wrought." Now back to Aldersgate House and to that room and corridor. Hanging over the entrance to the room, there is an iconic image that most Methodists were introduced to in their younger days. And this was a scene of John Wesley being rescued as a child of 6 from the rectory at Everett in Lincolnshire. So we've all, I had at any rate accepted it as it is, just as a great, well, John Wesley's mother felt that John Wesley had been rescued from the fire for a purpose, that God had saved him from the fire for a purpose. And John Wesley was burdened with this thought, I think, to a certain extent. He said, I was plucked from the fire like a brand from the burning. But this painting, in colour in its original, was executed in 1840, well over 100 years after the event. And that itself, I suppose, ought to send warning signals. All stories about the past are interpreted, but this one in particular is a lesson for Methodists in particular, and I'll tell you for why. If you see, let me go back again. Here was somebody standing on the shoulders of anxious neighbours, reaching up to rescue the infant John Wesley. And if you look a little bit more closely, we learn now that the person who posed for this gallant man effecting the rescue was a man called the Reverend James Everett. He was a thorn in the 1840s in the side of Methodism in England. He felt that Methodism had lost its way, and he wanted. He was eventually expelled, but this was Everett in effect saying, "Look, John Wesley needs to be rescued from his establishment all over again, and I'm the person who's going to do it." For his trouble, as I say, he was expelled. But it's a word of warning not to take everything at face value. And we're almost finished now. Over the years, and here's an example in the early 1900s, Methodism has tried to reorganize itself and become more efficient. And here is the reply to, this was a circular sent around to all the Methodist churches in Ireland, asking them how close is the next parish to you. And the idea was that maybe there could be rationalization. And here was this man in Cranegill, and he writes on the comment column in the extreme right-hand side, he said, "This form arrived at Cranegill on April the 25th, 10 days after it should have been in the hands of the Secretary of District. I sincerely hope it's not to become an annual event, else I shall move to have each superintendent have a private secretary to assist him, or I would suggest the formation of a corps of ecclesiastical police who must have a fair knowledge of mensuration to undertake the head-splitting duty of collecting and filing in the necessary information." I'll skip the next one, and the next. Well, one of the most poignant returns was from Dundalk. A man, the minister there, was called Alexander Fullerton, and the right-hand side, he's replying to the query, "Where's your nearest parish?" The answer is Drogheda. And he says, "I don't know of any," the question was asking, "Where's your borderland?" "I don't know of any borderland. Every Methodist spot is far away. Drogheda is our nearest circuit, but the echo of our footsteps is unheard," which is a very poetic way of putting it. So we finished the presentation by thanking the Methodist Conference for their support, for entrusting us with their archives, and for their contributions to maintain the support of our work, and for becoming members of our society and promoting the work of our society. And we want to thank PRONI as well. Thank you.
Afternoon. On behalf of the representative church body library, which is the Church of Ireland's reference library and principal repository of records, where we hold now over 1,100 collections of parish records, mostly from the Republic of Ireland. I would like to thank PRONI very much, the director, Dr. Michael Willis, and Lorraine Burke and Wesley Geddes for their invitation today. Earlier this year, it was a pleasure and an enlightening experience for me to come here to visit the reprographic unit in PRONI to view the work in progress on the digitization of church records in the context of many other records that are held here. With the expert guidance of Joy Carey and also Lorraine Burke, I got to understand the complex and painstaking work that has gone into the project that's been unveiled today. Every page of every volume must be accurately paginated and prepared for photography to ensure that the digital copies in each volume will correspond exactly with the originals. That is slow and methodical work. Fragile and unstable items require conservation before they are even touched or go near the photographic suite. Then each individual page of each volume is systematically captured with cleaning up, skewing and cropping post-processing to ensure the best possible image. The quality of the digital surrogates we have seen examples from today speak for themselves. Arguably, these are in fact better than looking at the originals, as I think Lorraine has demonstrated. And they're certainly more manageable and accessible because no longer do the users have to handle or page turn the precious originals. They can come to the reading room here and view them at the touch of a button. And as Lorraine has demonstrated, zoom in on the details. When I was reflecting about all of this with senior colleagues, members of the Library and Archives Committee, one commented that, a bishop in fact, he commented, one can only wonder what the previous generations of 17th, 18th, 19th and early 20th century clergy who were responsible for creating and keeping such records might think if they could see this work today and these results. So it is right that some focus and principal focus perhaps of today's launch should pay tribute to them. The clergy and indeed their successors, some of whom are here today, together with their parish clerks and the individual parishioners who collectively were involved in the process of creating and maintaining these precious records, keeping them safe through the centuries. Had it not been for their diligence and commitment at local parish level, there simply would not be any records. Now, this has huge significance today with the current demands from around the world from people of Irish descent anxious to reconnect with their ancestral information. Church records are vital sources for providing that information and have a much broader scope than is often supposed, because many of them predate civil registration. They contain a unique legal, medical and social evidence not available anywhere else or in any other format that can allow the reconstruction of family relationships. Just 2 weeks ago, as published in the Church of Ireland Gazette, our weekly newspaper, the Queen's University Professor Emeritus Brian Walker made a strong case about how potentially millions of people worldwide may benefit from easier access to not only Church of Ireland records, but other church records. But particularly the Church of Ireland records because they are the oldest available on the island, north and south. As Robin will agree, they can include details of people who may have become Methodist or Presbyterian, but before they were those denominations, as the established church, record the details of family information. And again, as the established church, the burial grounds of the Church of Ireland were used by everybody in society, and therefore their remit concerns people of all denominations. Because the Protestant migrations to North America and Canada date back to the late 17th and early 18th centuries, their significance has sometimes been overshadowed by the more recent and concentrated famine and post-famine emigrations of the 19th century, those principally involving people who were Roman Catholic. Yet a recent survey of those describing themselves as Irish in America showed that some 48% were in fact of Protestant background. President Obama is just one recent example of a former United States president with Irish Protestant ancestry. And that's only the Irish Protestant diaspora. There are also large numbers of Protestant origin Irish families living in Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, as well as other parts of the United Kingdom. So in this context, the Church of Ireland is particularly indebted to PRONI for taking on the task of digitising the registers of its parishes in Northern Ireland, thereby making them more accessible and discoverable for others, and also making surrogate copies should anything terrible happen at local level. Although I should point out that the parish clergy are obliged to keep, and they do, keep their registers in fireproof safes. We in the Church of Ireland hope that this positive collaboration will continue with PRONI so that more collections of registers can be captured digitally in due course. And furthermore, that in the Republic of Ireland we might begin the task of digitising parish registers from Church of Ireland parishes in the Republic, thereby mirroring the efforts that have started here, and thus maximising opportunity for the worldwide diaspora to reconnect with their ancestry in Ireland, both north and south. Thank you.